3 light-years away, the Vex homeworld, the Great Assembly. Hall fell silent as Sovereign Thresh watched the mortality count climb on the crystalline displays above his throne. 47,000. Dead this cycle. 2 million infected. No cure in sight. The bioweapon had been elegant in its cruelty. Whoever unleashed the wasting plague on Vex space hadn't just created a disease, they'd created a sentence. The infection spread through their neural networks, attacking the biological computing centers that made Vex physiology unique. A Vex body without functional neural architecture wasn't alive anymore. It was a meat puppet awaiting death. How long? Thresh asked, his voice a harmonic vibration that reverberated through the chamber. The Minister of Health, Kess, approached with the gait of someone carrying impossible weight. 3 seasons, perhaps less. The plague spreads exponentially. Our medical infrastructure is overwhelmed. We've lost 17 colony worlds entirely. The others are implementing isolation protocols, but isolation only delays the inevitable. Sovereign Thresh had ruled the Vex Collective for 43 cycles. He'd seen wars, famines, and natural disasters. He'd always found a solution. But this was extinction wearing the mask of biology. Send the broadcast, he commanded. Full spectrum. Every frequency we can modulate. Target every star system within transmission range. Sovereign, Kess hesitated. Broadcasting our weakness to unknown species is suicide? Thresh turned to face his minister directly. We're dying regardless, Kess, at least this way. We offer the universe a chance to save us. And if someone answers with conquest instead of compassion, well, we'll know the nature of the galaxy we live in. The broadcast went out 17 minutes later. We are the Vex Collective. Our people face extinction from plague. We seek medical knowledge, technological aid, or expert intervention. We offer compensation beyond measure. We broadcast this to any civilization that receives this signal. We ask not for pity, but for help. The message repeated across every frequency, a desperate hymn in the cosmic dark. United Earth Federation Council Chambers. General Sarah Chen stood at the head of the tactical overview, her gray eyes sharp as flint. Around the circular table sat 12 council members, representatives from Earth, Mars, Luna Base, and the off-world colonies. Secretary General Ambassador Hassan al-Rashid sat in the center seat, his dark hands folded in front of him. So, Hassan said quietly, unknown alien civilization, unknown plague, requesting aid across unknown space. Thoughts? It's a trap, Colonel Marcus Webb said immediately. They broadcast weakness to attract scavengers. Once we're there, they attack. It's basic predator psychology. Or it's genuine desperation, Dr. Elena Volkov countered, her accent carrying the weight of her Russian heritage. We don't have enough data to assume hostile intent. The signal is authentic. I've verified it personally. The mathematics of the genetic plague they're describing would require expertise I've only theorized about. They're genuinely seeking medical intervention. General Chen leaned forward. The real question is whether we can afford not to respond. Humanity's been searching for first contact for centuries. Here it is, not a formal greeting, but a cry for help. How we respond defines who we are. We send a medical team, Hassan said finally, but we don't send them naked into the void. Dr. Chen, I want a full carrier group, our best medical specialists backed by military escort. We arrive as healers, but we're armed well enough to defend ourselves if this goes sideways. With respect, Sir, General Chen interjected, our medical frigate, the Asclepius, can't outrun a determined attacker. If we're sending doctors, we're sending the 5th Fleet destroyers alongside them. 5 ships, fully armed, full combat capability. Hassan nodded slowly. 5 destroyers and the Asclepius. And we send people who understand both sides of this coin. Medical professionals with combat training, soldiers with medical certification. If we're going to show the galaxy what humanity is, we show it completely, not half measures. When do we depart? Elena asked. Now, Hassan said. Mobilize. Full speed. And get me in contact with anyone aboard who's command qualified. They need to understand the stakes before they leave the solar system. Aboard the UEMS Asclepius Medical Bay 3 doctor, James Morrison was halfway through a training scenario, teaching combat medics how to handle infectious disease protocols in 0G. When the klaxons started. Stand down, he called to his trainees. That's not a drill signal. The medical officers exchanged glances. Real alerts didn't happen on training runs. James pulled up the secure channel and his eyes widened as he read the briefing. First contact. Medical emergency. Military escort required. Speed priority critical. Suit up, he said to his team of 40 medics, surgeons, and infectious disease specialists. We're going to save a civilization. One of his surgeons, Dr. Aisha Okafor, raised her hand. Dr. Morrison, we don't know what we're walking into. These could be hostile. James met her eyes. They could be, but they called for healers, not warriors. Yes, we have military backing. Yes, that's there for our protection. But our job is to remember why we're going at all. Because someone somewhere is suffering and we can help. That's not a small thing, Aisha. That's everything. In the command center above them, Captain Marcus Sterling was running final systems checks. As commander of the Asclepius, he carried the weight of first contact on his shoulders. In the fleet channels, he could hear his counterparts on the destroyers running weapons diagnostics, shield tests, and tactical simulations. They were ready. Not for war, necessarily, but ready for whatever the galaxy threw at them. The journey 17 days at maximum warp. The crew of 6 ships found themselves becoming a unit. A single organism of humanity hurtling through the cosmic dark with a singular purpose. Save lives. Captain Sterling and his senior medical team conducted constant simulations. What protocols did they follow for an unknown plague? What equipment did they prioritize? How did they set up medical stations in potentially hostile territory? James Morrison sat in the ship's observation lounge one evening, staring at the stars streaking past. His second-in-command, Dr. Chen Wei, joined him silently. Nervous? We asked. Terrified, James admitted. We're flying blind into a scenario that could kill us all. These aliens could be completely incompatible with our biological understanding. Their plague might not be treatable with anything we have. And if there's military conflict, then soldiers die protecting us while we save lives, Wei finished. That's the deal we all made when we signed on to a first contact medical mission. We're healers. They're guardians. Both roles matter, James nodded. It was true, but truth didn't diminish the weight of responsibility. The Vex homeworld, orbital space, the planet hung before them like a jewel carved from violet and emerald, a world of delicate beauty and terrible suffering. Sovereign Thresh stood in the observation chamber of the royal station, staring at the approaching ships. They were unlike anything in Vex records, not built for elegance or art, but for function. Military design principles were visible in every hull line, every turret, every reinforced section. They come armed, Minister Kess whispered. Yes, Thresh agreed, and that's the most hopeful thing I've seen in weeks. Sovereign, I don't understand. Thresh turned to face his advisor. Any civilization that values only medicine would send unarmed vessels. Any civilization that valued only strength would send weapons and nothing else. But a civilization that sends both, that sends healers guarded by warriors, that's a civilization that understands responsibility. They're saying, we'll help you and we'll protect those who help you. That's not the behavior of conquerors, Kess. That's the behavior of people worth knowing. The Vex broadcasted their acceptance, their coordinates, their docking frequencies. First contact, the medical teams descended through Vex atmosphere in shuttles designed to handle hostile environments. Below them, the planet's surface revealed itself. Sprawling cities of bioluminescent architecture, vast medical complexes overwhelmed with dying bodies, and desperate crowds gathering to witness humanity's arrival. James Morrison suited up in full biosafety gear and looked at his team gathered in the deployment bay. 40 faces. 40 people willing to walk into an unknown plague to save alien lives. Remember your training, he said simply. Move with purpose. Every person we help reduces the suffering index of this world by 1. We're not conquering, we're healing. Let our actions speak louder than any words could. The shuttle touched down on a platform outside the primary medical complex. When the airlock opened, James descended the ramp and saw the Vex for the first time. They were nothing like he'd imagined. Tall, crystalline-bodied beings with 3 limbs and sensory organs that seemed to track movement through multiple spectra simultaneously, and they were dying. He could see the necrotic browning at their neural ports, the slow decay of infected tissue, the desperate hope in their optical fields. A figure approached, smaller than the others, moving with deliberate care despite clear signs of infection. I am Minister Kess of the Vex Collective, the being said, its voice modulated through translation matrices. You are the healers. I'm Dr. James Morrison, he replied. We're here to help. Where are your most critical cases? The work begins. The medical teams established a field hospital in 12 hours. They worked without rest, without stopping to process the strangeness of Vex physiology or the alien environment around them. James performed the first diagnostic scan on a dying Vex patient, a juvenile whose neural architecture was nearly 80% compromised. The results scrolled across his medical display, and he made a decision that would echo through history. The plague was bioengineered. The genetic markers were sophisticated enough to suggest weapon-grade development, but the base structure was similar enough to known plague patterns that Earth's antiviral cocktails might have an effect. "Start Protocol Delta 7, he commanded, "modified for Vex biochemistry, and get me cultures. We need to develop a targeted vaccine within 72 hours. Dr. Morrison, one of his team, called out. "We don't have authorization for untested treatments." "We do now," James said firmly. "On Earth, on this world, everywhere, the authorization is simple. Do what saves lives. Start the treatment." The Vex watched in amazement as human medical technology began to work. Within hours, the first patient showed signs of stabilization. By the next day, dozens had improved dramatically. And that's when everything changed. The shadow and the void deep in the Vex territories, in the industrial zones far from the medical centers, forces began mobilizing. They called themselves the Harvesters, a radical faction that had long chafed under the Vex Collective's governing structure. They saw the arrival of humans as an opportunity, not salvation. "The aliens are focused entirely on medicine," their leader Karn broadcast to his followers. "Their military escorts are in orbit, distant, uninvolved in ground operations. We strike now. We take their technology, their genetic databases, their medical knowledge. With human medicine, we become the supreme power in Vex space. And if they resist," one of his lieutenants asked. "Then we'll discover whether aliens bleed," Karn said coldly. "I suspect we will." The attack, the first explosion, hit the medical complex at 0300 hours local time. James was in the middle of running a genetic analysis when the building shook. Alarms screamed. His team scattered to secure patients and equipment. Outside, Harvester forces were cutting through Vex defense barriers with shocking ease. They'd infiltrated the local military weeks before, making this strike possible. "We're under attack," Captain Sterling's voice came through James's comm. "Harvester faction, ground forces targeting your location." "I'm sending Marines." "No," James said immediately. "We have Vex civilians here. Military response draws fire. Send security, not soldiers." The building's east wall collapsed inward. James made a split-second decision. "Everyone to the deep bay. Move patients into containment zones. Get the vaccine samples to the secondary lab." The first Harvester combat team came through the dust, weapons hot, ready for resistance. They found Dr. Morrison standing in front of 30 injured Vex civilians. Unarmed, his hands spread. "Shoot me," he said simply. "And you kill them too. I won't move." The Harvester team leader hesitated for just a moment that cost him everything. The Reapers, wake captain. Sterling watched the attack unfold on orbital sensors and made a decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "All destroyers, this is command," he broadcast. "Ground forces are engaging medical personnel. Alpha and Bravo provide ground support. Charlie, Delta, Epsilon suppress those attack vectors. Rules of engagement are hot. Protect the medical teams, go." What followed was not a massacre. What followed was precision. The 5 destroyers descended through Vex airspace, their weapon systems targeting with brutal accuracy. Harvester fortifications were neutralized. Artillery positions were suppressed. Ground forces found themselves facing an enemy that was efficient, powerful, and absolutely committed to protecting the medical compound. It lasted 4 hours. When the smoke cleared, the Harvesters had been broken. Not slaughtered. Military casualties were light because human forces prioritized control and precision over destruction. But the attack was ended, definitively and completely. And then something remarkable happened. The second wave, as the dust settled, human soldiers moved through the compound. But they didn't move past wounded Vex and leave them lying there. Instead, they took wounded Harvesters, captured enemies, and carried them to the medical bay. "We need medics for these prisoners," the squad leader said to James. His combat armor still hot from weapons fire. James blinked. "You're bringing me the people who just tried to kill us?" "They're injured," the soldier said simply. You're a healer, heal them. We don't decide who deserves medicine, you do. In that moment, the Vex understood something fundamental about humanity. It wasn't their weapons that made them powerful. It wasn't their technology or their genetic advantages or their ability to wage war. It was their moral clarity in the face of everything. They healed enemies. They protected healers. They fought when it was necessary and stopped when it was sufficient. They didn't conquer. They defended. They didn't dominate. They served. Aftermath. 3 weeks later, the plague was contained. Vaccine distribution began across Vex space. Mortality rates plummeted daily. Sovereign Thresh stood before the United Earth Federation representatives in a ceremony that would be remembered for generations. Around him, his people, alive because of human intervention. You came as healers, Thresh said formally. You fought as warriors. You healed even those who fought against you. This is something the Vex Collective will never forget. The Deathworlders came when we called, and they saved us not by conquering, but by caring. James Morrison stood among his medical team, watching the ceremony. He was exhausted. His team was exhausted, but around them thousands of Vex moved freely, their neural tissues healing, their civilization continuing. We did good, Wei whispered beside him. Yeah, James agreed. We did. Captain Sterling watched from the deck of the Asclepius, his destroyers standing sentinel in Vex space. His soldiers had fought when it mattered. His medics had healed when it mattered. His crew had proven something the galaxy would spend centuries discussing. Humanity wasn't just warriors or healers. Humanity was both, and that made them the most dangerous and most trustworthy species the galaxy had ever encountered. 30 days after first contact, the medical bay of the UEMS Asclepius had become a teaching hospital. Vex physicians crowded the observation galleries, watching Dr. James Morrison conduct a complex gene therapy procedure on a late-stage plague victim. The approach, Morrison narrated for his students, both human and Vex, is to use viral vectors to reintroduce functional neural code into damaged tissue. We're essentially rebuilding biological architecture at the genetic level. On Earth, this would take years of regulatory approval. Here, the patient is terminal without it, so ethical parameters are clear. The procedure succeeded. The Vex patient's neural tissue began to stabilize in real time. Around the observation gallery, audible reactions rippled through the Vex audience. Something between singing and trembling. This, one of the elder Vex physicians said quietly, is more advanced than anything in our own medical records. How is this possible? Necessity, Dr. Aisha Okafor replied from her position at Morrison's side. Humanity has faced extinction events dozens of times in our short existence as a spacefaring species. We've learned that those who develop medical science survive longer. Evolution, combined with aggressive research funding, creates solutions. What Aisha didn't mention was the guilt encoded into human medical ethics. Every doctor aboard the Asclepius had been trained in the history of medical disasters, the times when human nations withheld medicine from populations they deemed other. They carried that historical shame like a genetic marker, and it made them meticulous, careful, and absolutely committed to ensuring that medical knowledge was a universal right. Elsewhere in Vex space, the Harvester Detention Complex Karn, leader of the failed uprising, sat in a human-designed holding cell and wondered if this was torture. The cell itself was comfortable. Temperature-controlled for Vex physiology. Adequate lighting. Decent nutrition provided on regular schedules. What made it unbearable was the knowledge of what lay beyond it. The humans were healing his people. Hundreds of thousands of Vex who should have been dead within weeks were recovering. The plague, that had seemed like cosmic judgment, was becoming treatable, then preventable. The entire apocalyptic framework that had justified the Harvester's actions was evaporating. Worse, the humans weren't executing him. He'd prepared for death. Civilization after civilization solved their prisoner problems through execution. But the humans had tried him, found him guilty, and sentenced him to 40 rotations of labor service alongside humans who treated him with professional courtesy. They didn't hate him. They didn't punish him with cruelty. They simply corrected his behavior and moved forward. It was infuriating. It was humbling. It was working. The Vex Council chambers, one cycle later, Sovereign Thresh, convened an emergency session, and this time the nature of the emergency was different. The humans request permanent embassy status on our homeworld, Minister Kess announced, and they've offered to establish a joint medical research facility with full technology sharing agreements. The implications are staggering. With human medical knowledge combined with our biological understanding, we could advance our capabilities by centuries. Why would they make such an offer? Counselor Vren asked, suspicious by nature and training. What do they gain? That's the remarkable part, Kess replied. They asked nothing in return. When pressed, Captain Sterling said that advancing medical science benefits all species. He seemed to believe that helping us helps the galaxy. The silence that followed was profound. In Vex culture, power was zero-sum. If one faction gained advantage, another lost it. The universe was a game where every gain for someone meant loss for someone else. This fundamental axiom had shaped Vex civilization for millennia, but humanity apparently operated on different assumptions. We accept, Thresh declared. And we move to formalize a mutual protection accord. Any species that attacks one of our civilizations attacks both. The humans call this an alliance. We call it wisdom. 6 months post-arrival, the joint research facility Dr. Morrison found himself working alongside a Vex researcher named Tethys, and despite their fundamental biological differences, they'd developed an easy rapport built on shared love of discovery. This sequence, Tethys gestured to a holographic genetic model rotating between them, would take us a century to decode using conventional methods, but your computational approach is just pattern recognition applied brutally, Morrison finished. We throw computation at problems because we often lack the elegant mathematical approaches that come naturally to crystalline-based intelligence. It's not superior, it's just different. That's why collaboration works. Tethys made a harmonic sound that translated, approximately, as a laugh. Your species is strange, James. You claim no special wisdom, no inherent superiority, yet you've achieved what we considered impossible. How? James leaned back in the lab chair, specially designed to accommodate both human and Vex physiology. Because we were desperate enough to try everything. Because we failed enough times that we learned failure teaches faster than success. Because we had enough diversity of thought that someone was always suggesting the wrong approach that turned out to be right. And because when we found something that worked, we didn't gatekeep it. We shared it even with potential enemies. The prisoners, Tethys said. It wasn't a question. Especially the prisoners, Morrison agreed. Your Harvester faction is being treated for plague while detained. They're learning human medical techniques. Eventually they'll be released and they'll carry that knowledge with them. Some of them will probably use it to help people instead of hurt them. That's a win. Some might not. But we don't get to preemptively punish people for choices they haven't made yet. Tethys processed this in silence, her neural patterns creating geometric light displays visible through her translucent cranium. This approach is inefficient. It creates risk. It does, James agreed. But the alternative creates something worse, a universe where knowledge is a weapon and compassion is weakness. We chose the riskier path because the safe path leads to perpetual war. The trial of Karn. The courtroom was deliberately designed to accommodate both species comfortably. Vex judges sat at elevated platforms while human legal representatives occupied, chairs slightly lower, an architectural choice meant to suggest that neither species held inherent superiority over the other. Karn stood at the center, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. Captain Sterling served as witness for the prosecution. Karn directed an attack on our medical complex knowing it would kill civilian Vex and human medical personnel alike. The motivation was technological theft and political power seizure. But the attack failed, Karn's advocate, a human lawyer named Dr. Sarah Chen, argued. And since the attack failed, the damages are limited. Moreover, the subsequent detention and treatment of Karn has revealed important context. Karn was acting from genuine fear that the plague represented extinction. His methods were wrong, but his motivation was preservation. The judges deliberated for 3 rotations, a respectable time frame for Vex judicial processes. The verdict came as surprise to no one but shock to everyone present. Karn is found guilty of assault, conspiracy, and attempted grand larceny. Sentencing: 40 rotations of labor service in collaboration with the human medical teams. Upon completion of service, Karn will be offered conditional citizenship in the Vex Collective pending psychological evaluation. The court notes that Karn's actions, while criminal, emerged from survival instinct during crisis. Rehabilitation is possible and preferable to permanent detention. Karn's mandibles trembled. He'd expected execution or permanent imprisonment. Instead, he was being told that his crime had an expiration date and that beyond it lay potential redemption. As guards led him away, Captain Sterling caught his optical field. "You know," Sterling said quietly, "some of my officers think we should have executed you. But Dr. Morrison reminded us of something. Healing is for everyone, including those who've done harm. Even you deserve the chance to become better." 2 years later, the shared archive. The facility had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. What began as a medical research center had expanded into a full cultural exchange hub. Human musicians played alongside Vex sonic artists. Human engineers collaborated with Vex bioarchitects. Human philosophers debated cosmic questions with Vex consciousness researchers. And at the heart of it all, the shared archive, a repository of knowledge where human discoveries and Vex wisdom were cataloged together, freely available to any species in the region. Sovereign Thresh and Secretary General Hassan al-Rashid stood together, observing the archive's main chamber. Thousands of species had already contributed materials. The archive had become the primary reason that isolated, developing civilizations were joining the growing alliance rather than retreating into isolationism. "You didn't have to do this," Thresh said quietly. "You could have kept your medical discoveries proprietary, charged fees for access, maintained your advantage." "We could have," Hassan agreed. "But that's not who we are. Humans learned a long time ago that a rising tide lifts all boats. The stronger the galaxy becomes, the safer humanity is. Knowledge hoarded is knowledge wasted." Thresh made a harmonic sound. "Your species is remarkable, Hassan. You are warriors and healers, builders and teachers, killers and protectors. You contain multitudes. We contain contradictions," Hassan corrected gently. "We're not resolved. We're still learning, still fighting our worst instincts, still struggling to be better than our nature sometimes demands. But we're trying. That's the core of it. We're trying to be better than we are." The healing of Karn 500 rotations into his service, roughly equivalent to 3 years, Karn approached Dr. Morrison with something resembling humility. "I want to continue," Karn said. "My service is nearly complete, but I want to volunteer for an extension. I want to specialize in emergency medicine, specifically for combat zones and crisis situations." Morrison was reading diagnostic reports and didn't look up immediately. "That's a significant commitment. Why?" "Because," Karn replied, "I spent my first life taking. I spent my service learning to give. Now I want to help others learn what I learned, that giving is stronger than taking. That healing is more powerful than hoarding." "You understand?" Morrison said, finally meeting Karn's optical field. "That this means you'll serve alongside humans in dangerous situations. You'll trust us to guard your back while you guard ours?" "Yes," Karn said simply. "I understand," Morrison smiled. "Then welcome to emergency medicine. Karn, so you're going to be good at this." 5 years post-arrival, the epidemic address a new plague had emerged in the outer territories. Not as devastating as the wasting plague, but significant enough to require coordinated response. The Vex had requested human assistance. The humans had immediately dispatched teams. But something had changed in the 5 years of alliance. The human teams now included Vex specialists. The Vex medical infrastructure now incorporated human technologies and methodologies. The two civilizations had begun to fuse at the medical level, not losing their identities but creating something new. An integrated medical response system that was greater than the sum of its parts. When the new plague was identified, the response was immediate and sophisticated. Vex genetic architects working with human computational biologists identified the pathogen's vulnerability in 72 hours. Treatment protocols were distributed to 17 affected colonies within a week. The epidemic was contained before it could truly spread. And the response team? Mixed crews of humans and Vex, working alongside each other with the ease of species that had learned to trust each other not through ideology but through shared trauma and shared triumph. The ceremony at Galaxy's Edge 5 years after humanity had first arrived at the desperate call of a dying species, Sovereign Thresh stood in a chamber surrounded by the representatives of 37 different civilizations. When we broadcast our distress, Thresh addressed the assembly. We did not know who might answer. We hoped for salvation. Instead, we received something more valuable. We received friends. The humans came armed and healed. They fought our enemies and mended our wounds. Most importantly, they showed us something we'd forgotten, that strength and compassion are not opposing forces. They are complements. Hassan al-Rashid stood at Thresh's side, and together they unveiled a new monument, a sculpture that depicted both a human warrior and a Vex healer, standing back to back defending each other. This, Thresh continued, is the foundation of our alliance. This is the promise we make to the galaxy. We will defend those who heal. We will heal those who defend. We will be both strong and merciful. We will be the civilization we choose to become. Epilogue. Years beyond, the galaxy changed slowly, then suddenly. What began as a single alliance of two species grew into a network of allies. Civilizations that had feared military invasion learned that humans could be trusted. Civilizations that had feared chaos learned that Vex stability could anchor complex systems. And civilizations that had feared they could never achieve their potential learned that cooperation elevated everyone. In the medical bay of a new hospital orbiting the Vex homeworld, Dr. Morrison trained the next generation of integrated medical teams. Vex students sat alongside human students, learning a medicine that belonged to both cultures and neither. Remember, he told them during a graduation ceremony 5 years after the first crisis, you are healers first. Your species is secondary. Your allegiance is to the principle that life is precious and suffering should be alleviated whenever possible. Everything else, politics, resources, cultural differences, comes after that principle. One of his Vex students, a descendant of those who'd been dying during that first terrible year, raised a question. Dr. Morrison, what if we're betrayed? What if we save a species and they turn on us? James looked at her seriously. Then we'll be betrayed, and that will hurt. But you know what would be worse? If we withheld our healing power because we were afraid, that's not living, that's hiding. We choose to be vulnerable because the alternative is to become something less than ourselves. The final transmission years later, when historians would study this period, they would identify it as the pivot point in galactic civilization, the moment when warfare as the default state of interspecies relations ended. Not because anyone had banned warfare, not because anyone had become perfectly peaceful, but because one civilization had demonstrated through action that healing was stronger than conquest, that mercy could coexist with power, that the truest strength lay not in dominance but in service. The message went out to any species that would listen. We are humanity. We are healers and warriors, builders and guardians. If you call for help, we will come, armed to protect, trained to heal. We will not conquer you. We will not dominate you. We will help you become what you can be. This is the covenant we offer. Strength in service of compassion, power guided by mercy. We are the Deathworlders, and we choose to use our nature not for destruction, but for protection. The galaxy listened, and in listening, the galaxy changed.